Today, on the eve of Season 2, we're talking about something quite powerful that will impact your spec by quite a bit, as a damage increase, as a healing increase, even in some cases a tankiness increase, which is the embellishments. Why are we talking about embellishments? Because I guess you can call it meta of Season 2 embellishments has changed drastically, in the sense that many of the best in slot embellishments you crafted for every single spec basically kind of went out of style one way or another, either because you now have stronger, more powerful embellishments for your spec, or because the previously stronger embellishments have been nerfed. In particular, the nerfs are to two of the more previously used embellishments. Number one is the Elemental Lariat, and number two is the Potion Inhibitor. The Lariat has been nerfed because now the proc of your secondary stats is no longer 12 seconds long, but it's only 5 seconds long, increased by 1 second per elemental gem equipped. This means, in particular, that this necklace might again become stronger deeper into the patch when you have more and more sockets, but now, at the start of the season, when you will have less sockets, when you will get to upgrade your gear and you will lose all your previously equipped sockets, the Lariat will be weaker, so it has lost a lot of power for many of the specs. The other nerf is more of a proxy nerf, in the sense that the Potion Inhibitor embellishment wasn't nerfed by itself. This is still fine. What was nerfed, however, was the reason why pretty much all of the healers were running with Potion Inhibitor, and it was because of the Potion of Chill Clarity. Now, the Potion of Chill Clarity has been nerfed. Now, you don't just get a 40% slower cast time, but you also get a 40% slower global cooldown, which means now your instant cast spells are also going to be punished by using this mana discount potion, which has made the Potion Inhibitor much weaker and not at all wanted anymore for the majority of healers. Not really for the DPS. For the DPS, this is still usable as an embellishment, but this Potion Inhibitor embellishment wasn't one of the main picks for DPS players to begin with. So what do we have for plate wearers in terms of better embellishments, especially when it comes to DPS and when it comes to tanks like Prot Warrior and like Blood Death Knight? One answer is common in pretty much all of these specs, with the exception of Holy Paladin being the only healer in plate, as well as Frost Death Knight, which will have a different one as the best one. But for the other specs, the unstable Frostfire Belt is still quite the best option. It also remains, for a few of the specs, one of the better options in terms of crafting as your first craft to get the high item level unstable Frostfire Belt as an option. The other option is a brand new one. You will be plenty happy to know that this is just an attachment, which means you can literally choose whichever piece of gear you want to put this into. So I figure many players will actually prefer this type of embellishment, right? With the Frostfire Belt, you're basically forced to craft it on the belt and nowhere else. But for this one, for the Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch, this one is just something you put wherever you want, and you get a pretty good amount of passive background damage. So this is chosen by pretty much everyone with the exception of Holy Paladin. Once again, worth reminding that if you are focusing as a Mythic Plus Holy Paladin, it's still just fine to go for the Frostfire Belt and for the Shadowflame Patch if you want to be doing more damage in Mythic Plus, especially given that Holy Paladin is already doing quite little damage. So it's still a decent answer, especially later on in the tier when you have options to swap items to craft multiple backup pieces of gear with crafting as a Holy Paladin to also craft these for damage in Mythic Plus. But in the raid, Holy Paladin has different options being a healer with the undulating Spore Cloaks and the allied wrist guards of companionship. One is the stacking verse over time bracers and the cloak, the Absorb Shield Cloak. Giving you quite a lot of an Absorb Shield every 2 minutes is basically going to amount to some fixed amount of HPS over time. So for a healer, that's basically one of the highest amounts of HPS you can get from an embellishment. Previously, it was the Magazine of Healing Darts, but the Magazine of Healing Darts has been giga nerfed to the point of now being at best the second option for your crafted piece, is no longer the top choice for your crafted options. You can still do it easily, especially over the allied race card of companionship, especially because these are crafted and they are bracers. It's quite a terrible choice to craft the bracers because they give you very little stats. So if you want to craft a big, beefy 447 piece of gear, crafting the bracer, which is going to give you very little stats, is not that great. So it's also a plenty good enough option to choose the magazine of healing darts as your second embellishment, because then you can put it on a much beefier, a much bigger piece of gear, like, you know, for example, a weapon. But for most of the other play specs, it seems to be a split between the Frostfire Belt and the newly added Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch. Then you have Mail, just for Evokers, Hunters, and Shaman. In here you have 2 healer specs, and the rest is going to be DPS. The healer specs are slightly different than what we just saw with Holy Paladin. Restoration Shaman stays the same because they still value the Undulating Spore Cloak, also the Magazine of Healing Darts, and also as a possible option the Elemental Lariat. Where you have the difference is in Preservation Evoker, because at the moment one of the stronger picks, one of the better picks for Evoker is the Venom Steeped Stompers, the secondary stats stealing boots. Evokers scale very well in the raid, especially with Mastery, and that's a pretty good option at the moment for Evokers, together with, again, the Undulating Spore Cloak option as an embellishment. The other option is something that will also be decent enough for Devastation, but pretty much apparently at the moment nobody else. It's the Adaptive Dracothist Arm Guards. These are the cycling secondary stat buff bracers. You take damage, you gain Verse and Crit, you do crit damage or healing, and you gain Mastery and Haste. Those are good for both Evoker specs. They are not nearly as good for the Hunter and the Shaman specs. All of the other DPS specs, once again, go for the top option, the boring option, but the one that gives you the most choice, which is the Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch to put wherever you want. I also love the fact that it's called an armor patch, but you can put it on a piece of gear. Why are the Hunters crafting a bow with an armor patch? Who knows, but it is still the best option for Hunters. The only ones who are complete hipsters when it comes to their choices of embellishments are the 2 DPS Shamans that want to go for the set bonus. They want to go for the Wind Spirit's Lasso Belt and the Scale Rain Grips Gloves to gain the 2-piece set bonus. Crit, damage and healing have a chance to give you haste, stacking up 5 times. Haste is quite mediocre for Resto Shaman, it's awful for Preservation Evoker. Also Hunters don't really go that much for haste anyways, so these are the only 2 specs that are focusing this tier set, this mini tier set, as a possible option for embellishments. So these 2 Shaman specs are definitely the more unique choices we have seen so far when it comes to embellishment picks. The last one is the cloth embellishments with Warlocks, Mages and Priests, all of them being range DPS with a couple of exceptions of the Healing Priests. In here we have something completely different for all 3 classes, because Warlocks are, on top of valuing a lot the already shown Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch, what they value a lot is the Amis of the Blue. So this one is just a flat out damage increase. You're not getting a buff increase to yourself, you're not getting secondary stats buffed to yourself, just a flat proc for more damage. With the third option being, once again, the Lariat. Priests, however, go for something different. First of all, Shadow Priest continues the option of the Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch for more flat damage, as well as the blue Silken Lining. This one gives you more stacking Mastery, given that it's something that Shadow Priest needs. This one should perhaps be the best overall if you're thinking about options, because this one means you have 2 optional reagents, so you are not locked in any armor slot. So you don't have to fear. You don't have to fear going in Mythic Plus or looting something from the vault in the exact same slot of something you have crafted. Because with this one, Shadow Priest can basically wait. They can sort of chill and see where they want to craft something as they wait for their loot, for example. Meanwhile, for the healer specs is something more traditional that we have already seen for other healer specs. We have the Undulating Spore Cloak, once again for both of the healers, as well as the nerfed Magazine of Healing Darts as the other option for both of the healers of Priest. For mage specs, it's more of a choice, because for mage specs you can get Arcane Mage being pretty much the only spec that can still value the potion absorption inhibitor for stronger potion duration. They still can value, especially the two mastery specs in Fire and Arcane, the blue silken lining embellishment. Fire Mage is also still valuing the Amis of the Blue shoulder pads, which Warlocks are still favoring. All three specs are of course still going for the Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch as the default option for most damage. Then you have the last of the armor types, which is gonna be Leather. Leather does have quite a few interesting additions, because you have the new entry of the Slimy Expulsion Boots. These are the ones that will reduce your haste, but in return deal extra nature damage. Now this one works with some of the effects that can buff nature damage in your spec or with your effects. Balanced Druid, for example, want to go for this one even without any other embellishments. They are actually rather going for the Toxified Armor Patch. This one basically just makes your DK embellishments 100% stronger. So you are taking the boots and then nothing else, just making the boots 100% stronger. The same goes for three other specs not particularly known for focusing on haste too much, which is the entirety of Rogue. All three of the Rogue specs are just fine going for the Slimy Expulsion Boots, even Outlaw wanting to double up on that by taking the Toxified Armor Patch as well. Assassination Rogue also wants to double up on that for more nature damage, since they do have ways to do more nature damage with their abilities by taking the Spore Colony Shoulder Guards. No other of the specs wants to go for this type of damage, since they can't benefit nearly as much from the nature damage increase. Subtlety Rogue will go for the Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch as a second choice after the Expulsion Boots. Brewmaster Monk, because of some intense shenanigans with their actions per minute, they are already using the Fire Damage Ring from Vault of the Incarnates, plus the Amulet with all of its damage effects, and also doubling up on that with the Flaring Cow, doing fire damage, triggering the Fire Ring. That's still the default option for Season 2. Second option for more damage is once again the Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch. Meanwhile, for Windwalker, not caring too much about haste, they are still willing to double up on the Slimy Expulsion Boots bonus and going for the Toxified Armor Patch instead. A bit more boring and not nearly as unique as a few of the other healing specs are going to be Mistweaver and Restoration Druid. They are still gunning for, once again, the Undulating Spore Cloak as well as the magazine of Healing Darts, even after the nerfs. For Feral Druid, also the Toxic Thorn Foot Wraps for the more nature damage, or the Slimy Expulsion Boots for less haste for more nature damage are an option, also doubling up on that with the Toxified Armor Patch for even more, or maybe just the Blue Silken Lining for mastery increase for Feral. Havoc is also going down the same route, again the Toxic Thorn Foot Wraps doubled up by the Toxified Armor Patch are also an option for Havoc Demon Hunter, while Vengeance is kind of chilling. Vengeance can still take the Flaring Cowl because they do have plenty of fire damage in their kit. They don't need the fire damage rings to enable this, but they don't seem to have anything nearly as specific as a few of the other specs we have seen. Now, some of these embellishments, after we have looked at all of them, are still bound to change a bit. As mentioned, Blizzard has nerfed a couple of them. They also nerfed recently the Healing Darts for all of the healers. We might still see some last-minute changes to some of the embellishments, but at the moment this is what most of the specs are currently gunning for when it comes to their choices of embellishments. As I said, some specs might be a little bit more constrained by the fact that they have to pick two specific armor slots, like for example, if Holy Paladin picks the Undulating Spore Cloak and the Wrist Guards of Companionship, they are locking themselves in Cloak and Bracers. If the Rogue is going for the Expulsion Boots and the Colony Shoulder Guards, they are locking themselves, or if the Shamans are going for their mini tier set bonus, they are locking themselves in Belt and Gloves. compared to other specs, which might go for a Shadowflame tempered armor patch, which can be put on any item type that you're crafting, plus the blue silken lining, which can also be put on any type of armor you're crafting. So that would make it more easy for you to sort of, move around the pieces you want to craft based on the type of armor and gear you have been looting from Mythic Plus, from the raid, from the vault and whatnot. So this is the current situation right as we are getting, I'm guessing, release date for Season 2 in NA. Tomorrow for EU it will come out as well. So I'm going to leave you to the rest of your beginning of Season 2, hoping that some of you might get a little bit more of a better insight on which embellishments to choose. With this out of the way, we are thanking, of course, as usual, all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel. We're also thanking all of the ones who are supporting for completely free, like, for example, liking and commenting down below or subscribing to the channel itself. You can also support in other ways, like following me over on Twitter, as well as following me over on my stream on Twitch. So, with this one out of the way as well, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, I just wonder the hundreds of thousands of gold that will have to be forked out for all of these embellishments.